Welcome to Milk Market Tidbit for the May Dairy Products Report that the USDA released on Wednesday. This is Dr. Lawrence Jones, and I'm recording this on Friday, the afternoon of July 5th. So the Dairy Products Report is our third report of the month. It comes in after the milk production and the cold storage, and we tie all these together, we can start to get an idea of demand, even though it may take 2 or 3 months to get a clear picture of that. So let's start with the issue of export. So here's our cheese prices relative to the global dairy trade, which is in green. We had one of those this last week, or the National Dairy Sales Reports that are in blue. So there was clearly an opportunity to be exporting for the first 4 months, but that really is starting to erode. But one of the things that we've got to remember is just because cheese prices go up, the exports don't stop on a dime. Because again, in May, you may have already sold some cheese for July that is going to get exported. But nonetheless, the last global dairy trade was down, quite a bit, almost 7%, and cheddar was down. Butter's at $3.14 on spot, $2.91 global. So again, we're not going to be exporting; we're too high. Cheddar is $1.81 on the world market, so that market is probably out. Non-fat dry milk is $1.25 with spot $1.18. That's only 7 cents, so that doesn't look like there's a tremendous amount of exports available on that. So the export market probably will be shutting down, but I did just get the export numbers from StoneX, and these were stronger than I had actually thought they would be. So cheese, we exported 8.8%. A typical month without a lot of price support would be around 6.9, maybe 7. So in fact, exports were up. We exported 2.5% of the butter. They also provided the import. So we did actually import 18,000 metric tons of cheese, and we actually imported more butter than that we had actually exported. So when we get the dairy products report, there are 2 numbers that we're looking for, which is the cheese production. And that probably was a little bit light from where we thought it would be, and less milk, about 61.6% of the milk went into cheese. And we're also looking for the butter production, which actually was very strong this month. So if we just start plotting some of this stuff out, this is the cheese to milk ratio, assuming 10 pounds of milk to a pound of cheese. That gets you the amount of milk that went into cheese, and it was about normal. I mean, probably a little bit below trend line. And what I always like to do is come back and say, if we look at this number 3 years from now, what are we going to say? And it's probably just a little bit below trend line. So cheese production has been more or less flat for 3 years. This is typically a situation where we added a cheese plant and now we're flat. We are due to add some more cheese plants, so we'll see where that production ends up. And this is the graph that I absolutely love for the dairy products report, is rolling disappearance and rolling production. So this is very slow to respond, but look what's going on right now. It is saying that we have a higher disappearance than we have production. So that's the first time that that blue line has been above the black line to that magnitude for quite a while, and very seldom does it actually get up to that point. This is going to suggest that we've got 36.8 days of surplus cheese, and to meet this cheese demand we need about 9.4 million cows. Now to put that into exactly what happened in May, so our rolling disappearance is 39,000 and change per day, and we produced 39,000 and a little bit. So actually in May we may start turning this around a little bit, but it's pretty well balanced at this point. The other thing we can look at is the percent of the cheeses. Italian is always the highest. It's been declining, and it came in right on trend line, so no big surprise there. American contains cheddar, and again, you can look at about 70% of American is cheddar, because cheddar is like 28% and cheddar is around 40. The American has been increasing, and we're pretty much at trend line. Not a big deal. Other ones a little bit above. So here was the big deal. Cheddar has been below that trend line, and so that's probably going to support prices, because it doesn't matter what happens to cheese. It's all about fresh cheddar on the spot market that drives the American prices. Here's our American cheese production, and one of the reasons I don't like year-over-year numbers is last year was an outlier, so when we compare that year-over-year, it's probably not a good comparison. It came in a little stronger than the seasonal adjusted level. Now, what that seasonal adjusted level is you take last month and say, how does it normally change? So it normally goes down, normally goes down, normally goes down. And so it says it should have come down, but in fact it didn't. So if we look at cheddar, it has been way off trend line. Now it came in a little bit stronger than the seasonal adjusted level, which says that in May they made a little bit more cheese compared to April than they normally would. And by the way, last year may not have been an outlier, but it was way above trend line. So comparing these two, again, is probably not a good process. So Italian type cheeses were actually a little bit below the seasonal adjusted number, but right on trend line. And these have been growing at 1.7% per year. The last thing that gives us an idea about cheese production is whey, but the whey production was, below trend line and much lower than we thought it would. Let's turn to butter for just a minute. Again, the same thing. I asked, what percent of the fat did butter represent? And just as an aside, the biggest consumer of fat is actually cheese. If you want to track where fat goes, look at the pounds of cheese that were made. But the amount of fat going into butter was actually up from what we expected, up above trend line. So our daily butter production was higher than normal and higher than the trend line, and so it was very strong. The other question is butter relative to non-fat dry milk. Anytime you've got high numbers, it says that you're getting cream or fat from sources other than dryers, and that makes sense. If we got 4.17% fat and we're selling whole milk at 3.25, you're skimming off quite a bit. So again, we're very much still have much more butter than we do non-fat dry milk. And part of that is the relative value of butter relative to non-fat dry milk. And butter represents $4 above non-fat dry milk on the class 4 price. And so this was very strong when butter prices were really strong. Go back to prior to fall of 22, non-fat dry milk was king, but it's not been king for a while. A few of the other things that take components would be ice cream. That was just exactly where we expected it to be. Had a kind of a slow start, but we're right where we would expect it to be. Yogurt production slipped a little bit. All right, so that gives you a sense of the dairy products report, strong butter production, reasonable cheese production. So this week we've finished up. We had a holiday, so next week we're going to get the first July National Dairy Sales Report, a crop production report, and then we begin to get the statistical uniform prices. It'll be quite a while before we start getting the milk production report on the 23rd.